Sorry, Miss Minley.
Good morning, JTA.
Good morning, Minister.
Good morning to all our teachers.
Good morning.
Awesome. It is a great day today. The storm has passed. Let us be glad. Yes, let us give God thanks. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Let me begin by acknowledging the Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, our Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Dr. Grace McLean, our Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry, Dr. Casson Troop, our Acting Chief Education Officer, all the representatives from the Ministry, Mr. Winston Smith, President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Mr. Jasford Gabriel, immediate past President, Mrs. Harrison, President-elect, Mr. Brian Farquharson, Secretary General, Dr. Charmaine Gooden Monteith, Deputy Secretary General, and other members of the JTA Executive and General Membership, members of the media, distinguished guests. Good morning again.
Good morning. Good morning.
Let me first thank the Jamaica Teachers Association for inviting me to their 57th annual conference. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, along with my colleague, Minister of State, the Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, and other key members from the Ministry of Education, Youth. Let me again say congratulations to Mr. Smith, President, and Ms. Harrison, President-elect. To Mr. Gabriel, immediate past President, I say it was a pleasure working with you in the position of President. You remained consistent on your push to have more technology in our schools. You have convinced me to look more deeply into the zoning of schools. Though I believe we may need a different terminology in order to allow the concept to be more readily understood and accepted. I found you to be collaborative. I believe that you truly embodied the fact that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information and the JTA are of one accord in wanting to do all we can to have significantly more of our students become high-performing, high-achieving students. And as I said at the church service, and repeat here for emphasis, there is no divide between the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information and the JTA in our objective for a significantly better outcome from the education sector. I know you will continue to be at the monthly meetings with the ministry, And I want to say to President Smith, we ended the school year with the shortest JTA issues list ever. And the PS confirmed this because she's been at the ministry for more years than we can count. She said, and her words were, "In all my years at the ministry, this has never happened before." Thank you as well, immediate past president, for spearheading the JTA's contribution of $1 million to the One Laptop or Tablet per Child initiative. The devices were purchased and handed over to students. We have the pictures to prove it, and you were there. Thank you. So, Mr. President, no pressure, but you have a high bar over which to jump. So, you or teachers may recall that Minister Morgan and I started at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information almost a year ago on September 15, 2020. 6 months into the pandemic. Fears were high, and as Jamaicans, we were anxious for any news of the progress of vaccines. Schools were due to be opened for face-to-face classes on October 5, 2020, using a risk-ranking approach. Those schools not able to do face-to-face would have to be online or use the learning kits along with the audiovisual lessons on radio and television. And of course, we had a wide distribution of textbooks, and we added workbooks so parents would not have to have the burden of buying workbooks. This happened for the first time in the education sector. The singular focus of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and our teachers and school leaders then in 2020 was to keep our students learning even during the pandemic. I've said it many times before and will say it again. Commendations to our teachers for stepping forward and getting trained on the Google Suite Learning Management System. You created thousands of virtual classrooms so you could have classes with thousands of students all across Jamaica. You reached out to children who were not able to be online. You created videos of lessons for many subject areas. Without your efforts during the pandemic, the learning loss would have been more severe. And I commend you and thank you for bringing our children through the school year to the point where some 36,000 students sat a modified version of the primary exit profile exam and retained the confidence in transitioning to high school, a process that has gone quite smoothly. Our students will transition to high school with information about their level of achievement so that our teachers in high schools will be better able to know the right type of intervention needed, if any. Additionally, almost 40,000 students at our high schools were also able to take their external exams, their CSEC, their CAPE, their City and Guilds, NCT VET, and others. In the years to come, when historians look back and compare our collective response in the education sector to keep our children learning during the pandemic, when historians compare our response to the response of other countries, I believe that Jamaica will be put in the column that says, Collectively, teachers and school leaders, parents, the Ministry of Education, and other stakeholders responded in a responsible way and responded quickly without hesitation. Was everything perfect? No. Internet connectivity was a pain point. Not all our students had devices. I'm personally proud that as a ministry, we ran the fastest mile ever to get devices to our students. At the close of the school year just passed, we would have distributed approximately 125,000 devices to our students, with more on the way. We prioritized our most economically vulnerable students, which is the right thing to do. I know that over the last many months, our students would have gained significant skills in utilizing technology for other than entertainment. They learned to create documents, do presentations, communicate on the online platform, upload their work, find the work the teachers created and uploaded. They learned the difference between PDF and a Word document. I believe they learned in 1 year much more about technology than we could talk to them about technology, because they had the opportunity to experience the technology. And we all will see the fruits of this in the years to come. So teachers, please embrace this learning experience that you and your students would have had. Technology will remain a permanent part of the education system. I can promise you that all our students will have devices, whether supplied by the government, parents, or others. And I can promise you as well that all our schools will have adequate connectivity, not just for our students, but for our teachers and school administrators, for whom school is their workplace. Yes, I support laptops for teachers. And will work my hardest to make this a reality.
Amen.
Recall, I was there at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service when you negotiated your tablets. Interestingly, I was at the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology to marshal the resources to ensure the procurement and subsequent distribution.
Good cycle, you're in the right place.
And so I want to say to you, your theme for this year's conference, Bridging the Digital and Social Divide, Transforming Education for Economic Growth and Sustainable Development, is most timely. The theme captures the complexities and challenges of ensuring every child has access to technology, and calls us to acknowledge and take steps to reduce and possibly eliminate the factors that create unhealthy differences or inequity in our education sector. Beyond this, we must transform our education sector by significantly raising the achievement level of all our students. You and I know that this is the foundation on which to achieve lasting, inclusive economic growth and sustainable development, so that more of our fellow Jamaicans can emerge from poverty. I'll turn now to our back-to-school plans and the Ministry of Education's response. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information Education in Emergencies Response Plan which focuses on addressing the learning, well-being, nutritional, safety, and parenting needs of our learners at all levels of the education system, will continue. Our collaboration with school leaders, teachers, parents, and educational and international development partners to provide the requisite support will enable the continued teaching and learning of our students and our teachers, whether they are physically in school or operating through a remote or distance learning program. The ministry will continue its activated emergency remote learning program to include online, virtual, computer-aided, asynchronous, and synchronous learning experience. Remember, I told you technology will continue to be a permanent part of the education system. We will continue our printed learning kits, our radio education series, and televised learning, and in-person, face-to-face learning, and I will spell this out more as I go along. The Education in Emergencies Response Plan is enabled by the continued provision of appropriate policy guidelines, funding support, staffing support, well-being support, training for school leaders and teachers in virtual leadership, pedagogy, and safety protocols, curriculum support, infrastructure upgrades, ICT support, digitized content and other resources, and technical guidance from our education officers. To ensure equity and inclusion, special attention is given to students at the early childhood level, students with special needs, students in remote areas with limited access to internet, and students and family on the program for advancement through health and education path. Let's look now at the teaching and learning modalities for the reopening of educational institutions. I think it is safe to say that all Jamaicans know and understand the current phase of the pandemic with which we are faced. So far, it is more deadly than previous phases. And let me pause to commend the leadership of the JTA in encouraging vaccinations and bringing information to your members. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has created several such fora as well for our teachers, our school leaders, and administrators to ask questions about the vaccines. And so far, the collective efforts have paid off. The vaccination rate of the education sector far outpaces that of the general population. The message from the education sector is that the education sector cares. The education sector wants to see your children back in the face-to-face mode again, back in the classrooms with their teachers and their classmates. Tomorrow, we will have a joint press conference with the Ministry of Health and Wellness to provide more details to all Jamaicans about the opportunity we now have to vaccinate our students age 12 and older with the Pfizer vaccines starting this weekend. We encourage our parents to make that important decision for the protection of their children. So in light of this new development, we want to begin to lay out for our stakeholders the path to returning to face-to-face. So the first term, which is a Christmas term of the 2021-22 school year, will officially begin on September 1, 2021, with the first teaching day on the first Monday, September 6, 2021. We will begin in the first several weeks by using the various modalities we used in the last school year, which are the online computer-aided learning, and of course, you're very familiar with the learning management system. This platform has and will continue to provide virtual classroom spaces for interactive teaching and learning, or audiovisual learning guided by a national timetable using our eHome School Network, PBCJ, Ministry of Education YouTube channel, and Digicel Go Loud app. Or printed learning packages or kits to include workbooks, handouts, worksheets, textbooks, activity booklets, etc. This will be applicable where self-directed or asynchronous activities are assigned. Our regional offices will assist with the printing of these resources where needed. It must be noted that all our televised radio and television lessons, as well as our learning kits produced and distributed in partnership with schools, UNICEF, the Gleaner, and the Jamaica Observer, have been archived and can be accessed on the educate.gov.jm landing page. Given the timeline for vaccination of our 12-year-olds and older, face-to-face teaching and learning in our high schools is targeted for early to mid-October. So between September 6th and mid-October, we will be using the three modalities I just described for our high schools. In our primary schools and early childhood sector, we will commence in mid-September. By that time, we believe, and I said we will commence face-to-face, right? September 6th, until then, we will be in the virtual world. We will be using our audiovisual learning. We'll be using our printed learning package or kits. But by mid-September, we believe and we are encouraging and prioritizing more of the personnel in the education sector, or administrative staff, or groundsmen, or cooks, or cleaners, or security men and women, or maintenance persons to be vaccinated, thus allowing us to start our face-to-face with a high level of confidence. Already, as I indicated, a high percentage of persons in the education sector have been vaccinated, and we commend you. Let us take that number higher. We'd like to remind you of the continued strict adherence to the COVID protocols, the mask wearing, hand washing, sanitizing, social distancing inside and outside of the classroom for both our teachers and students. And for those of us in the education sector who have to take public transportation, these protocols will have to be followed with religious fervor. The protocols are for the protection of you, the students, and teachers. They are for the protection of all of us. As was done in the school year just ended, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information will make resources available, space, staffing, based on enrollment, etc., to facilitate the inclusion of face-to-face engagement guided by the safety protocols. This means that in some cases, only a subset of each cohort or class of students will be at school each day while others will work remotely, considering the COVID-19 prevention and control measures. We know that our principals, our teachers, our administrative staff, parents, and students are anxious and ready to get back to the classroom. This pandemic has presented us with a dynamic situation, and as such, the Ministry of Education continues to work closely with the Ministry of Health and Wellness as they continue to provide the proper guidance and support, especially when it comes to the plans for reopening schools for face-to-face learning. So to date, There are 975 schools approved for reopening. We have been doing the maintenance work. We know the issues because we've been speaking to our principals and our teachers. We know the infestation that has been happening at our schools. We know the leaky roofs, the need for fencing, and all of that. And we have been busy with our list. We have been going out to our schools, our maintenance persons, and we brought him here today just in case there are any questions about it. But we have been doing the work in anticipation of our teachers and students and administrators being back in the face-to-face world. There are only 18 schools that were provisionally approved because they didn't have everything in place. The pending issues are being attended in preparation for full approval. Given that the COVID-19 protocols are still strictly enforced for many of our schools, social distancing will be a limiting factor on how many students can be accommodated in the face-to-face mode at the school all at once. Schools at the primary level are advised to prioritize students without devices and students without internet connectivity, while at the same time rotating so that all students have a chance to have some face-to-face engagement with their teachers. This is to ensure that we can better account for all of our students throughout the academic year. And President Smith, you mentioned in your address last night that you are of the view that every citizen of Jamaica, and oh, by the way, even though I was not physically here, I listened to every word that you said. You mentioned in your address that you're of the view that every citizen of Jamaica should take the vaccine, and you congratulated all the teachers who have done so. I would like to personally commend you on this pronouncement and invite you to join the national campaign that the Ministry of Education will be launching to encourage our Jamaican parents or children to get vaccinated, to not only protect themselves, but to protect all of us as well, and to ensure that all our children can, over time, return to face-to-face. You've made the commitment, and we are ready to partner with the JTA on this mission. I turn now to a topic that you brought up, Mr. President. I was disappointed to hear you talk about how much blame and finger-pointing there is on our teachers for the ills of the education sector. Disappointed because I have been a great pain to explain why we prefer to be in a world of accountability rather than a world of blame. For the record, at this 57th annual conference of the JTA, let me state categorically that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information under my stewardship has never sought to blame teachers or point fingers. That is not the direction in which I want to go. Blaming and finger-pointing are negative. It wastes time, it wastes resources. I have called for accountability. Accountability is not the same as blame or punishment. Blame is focused on the past and on punishing the offender. To be accountable means to take responsibility for results, whether those results are good or bad. It means finding solutions for problems and applying lessons learned in order to improve future results. Being accountable is constructive because it focuses on the future. I am at the head of the line in terms of being accountable. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, all its regions, are accountable for the outcome of the education sector. Teachers and all our school leaders are accountable for the outcome of the education sector. Parents, students, communities, Jamaicans as a whole, we are accountable in different ways for the output of the education sector. What I believe is more productive to do is to identify the areas in which our teachers need support, and for the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information to take steps to provide that support so that our teachers can be more effective in the classroom, so that when next we look at the NEI report, more of our schools will be ranked satisfactory or better. With our focus on supporting teachers, we will be rolling out a number of initiatives, and let me list them and explain them as I go along. The first is our specialist subject teachers in our primary schools. That is one of our flagship programs that will begin in this new school year, and I will explain more. Our lesson plan repository is another flagship program. We want to significantly increase the number of master teachers. You heard the immediate past president talk about our objective of 3,000 master teachers to enhance teaching and learning in classrooms across the school system. Additionally, master teachers is also about creating opportunities, creating a career path for those teachers who are not keen on becoming principals because they simply love to teach and want to continue doing that. To reposition the job of a master teacher as a career path is but one way to say we value you, our teachers, and want you to remain here in Jamaica by providing alternative career paths. Mr. President, we certainly do not want to be reading about the second book of the Bible.
Neither do I, Minister. Neither do I. You want me to stay here?
So you will see as well, in terms of additional initiatives, increased personal and professional training for teachers. I know JTA does some of this already, but the ministry is going to expand on that effort. We will allow our teachers, we want our teachers and our school leaders to grow in their professional and personal lives. You would have seen or heard about the National School Learning Intervention Plan, comprising the National Homework Support Program. And it must be disheartening to our teachers when they give homework to students, to have those students show up the next day and they haven't done their homework. They forgot about it. They, whatever the excuse is. We are putting in place support for homework so that those concepts that you teach in the classroom, they can be reinforced. So when you see the students again, they're at a better place. You would have heard about our National Extra Lessons program, and you would have seen us roll out the National Summer School which helped us significantly in terms of bringing back into the face-to-face environment many of our students who were not consistently engaged. And of course, there will be school-level intervention programs. We will talk to you as well today about our substitute teacher online platform, which is something that I know has been long needed. So let me just touch a little bit on the lesson plans. Lesson plans will be provided for each subject area. These plans should be customized by schools to ensure that they are relevant to the group of students for which they will support. Approximately 400 lesson plans are already available in various formats such as PowerPoint presentation, Word files, and learning kits. So, our teachers, this is not something we're telling you we're going to do. We have begun the doing. These 400 lesson plans are accessible right now via the ministry's e-resource website, educate.gov.jm, and Google Classroom, which is linked to the Common Planning Time initiative. May I get an amen? Amen. A total of 1,730 new lesson plans will be digitized to facilitate feedback from teachers that will speak to profile of the students for which the plans were customized, the nature of the customization done, and the reflection upon using the plans. Yes, I know I haven't been a teacher in the classroom, but I know teachers, and I know of the agony of writing these lesson plans. I know of the many hours, right? The late Sunday nights or the late Friday nights, and the principal on your back to do it, right? Weekends and holidays, no more. And so, when we talk about wanting better outcomes, we don't default to blaming anyone or anything. What we default to is finding ways to support our teachers so that it frees up more of your time to do what it is that you want to do in the classrooms, which is interact with the students, engage with them, help them along their life's journey. That is what you want to do, not all the other administrative stuff that takes up quite a bit of your time. So the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has developed the National School Learning and Intervention Plan, as I said earlier, to guide curriculum management for the reopening of schools at the beginning of 2021-22 academic year. The National School Learning and Intervention Plan, which comprised the National Homework Program, the National Homework Support Program, the National Extra Lessons Program, the National Summer School, which will be institutionalized in our school system, and the School Level Intervention Program. This has been created against the backdrop of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in Jamaica and its impact on education, resulting in learning gaps for several students. The plan provides a detailed framework to guide school leaders in making decisions about teaching and learning, with the key goal being to get students back on their learning track. It includes extra teaching time for students through summer school, extra lesson homework programs, strategic management and delivery of the daily curriculum guided by the diagnostic data, to group students for instruction according to their pathway, defined by the proficiency pathway, which would be ready, not ready, or near ready, or the secondary pathway, pathways 1, 2, and 3, and career pathway. Training for staff and students, psychosocial support, child find initiative, and parent engagement support. The intervention framework was sent to all schools with tools for planning. To be prepared for effective implementation, teachers and principals have been sensitized and trained in using the framework through JTC, Jamaica Teaching Council, and NCEL. Also, schools will benefit from the following: targeted objectives for the school year, modified curriculum guides, education in emergencies manual for the reopening of educational institutions, education in emergencies standard operating procedure for teachers, education in emergencies models of curriculum implementation for the reopening of schools, education in emergencies, COVID-19 reopening protocols for early childhood institutions, framework for the distribution of tablets in schools. All schools have been provided with their first tranche regular grants and will be provided with the second tranche by the last week in August. The funding can be used to fund the operational cost of remote and distance learning. All schools are equipped with the necessary resources for sensitization protocols to be observed and maintained. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information is providing just over $1 billion on educational resources, including the provision of workbooks aligned to the core areas for all grade 6 students in the upcoming school year. Traditionally, parents were required to finance the cost of workbooks. Other provisions that we've made this year include subsidy for exams at the secondary level, $750 million for 4 subjects: mathematics, English, information technology, and a science subject, and 8 subjects, as you know, for PATH students. Or provision for infrastructure projects this year, $1.6 billion to deal with, as I said earlier on, the termites, the electrical works, the roof repair, the fencing, etc. And work is underway. And we have a commitment for students on PATH in grades 7 to 9 to get tablets in the upcoming school year. I turn now to the specialist subject teachers in our primary schools. The ministry is well advanced in its plans to introduce specialist subject teachers at the primary level, starting with 238 primary schools in this new school year, and in another 98 schools in January of 22, and continuing to other schools until we complete this. The specialist subject teachers will be deployed to focus on 8 specializations: mathematics and science, language arts and social studies, language arts and Spanish, religious education and civics, visual arts and drama, physical education and health and family life education, resource and technology and music. You know as well as I do that the education sector in Jamaica has been using the generalist model in our primary schools for a very long time. One teacher teaching all subjects, from PE all the way to, you name it, right? Biology, mathematics, language arts, drawing, everything. One teacher teaching all subjects. It is not producing the results that we want. There is no blame, no finger pointing. We simply look at what is, and we say, how can we change it? What can we do? Too many of our boys and girls are failing mathematics and language arts, and we cannot be satisfied with that. A few years ago, the Ministry of Education sent a delegation to Singapore, paid big money for airfare and hotel for them to understand what it is that's helping Singaporean schools to deliver those enviable results. One of the best practice was that country's use of specialist subject teachers. This is an example, Mr. President, of being bold in looking at the problem of student underachievement. And instead of looking around for someone or something to blame, we did the work to figure out in what areas could we best support our teachers so we get a significantly better result. We have already done the skills inventory of our teachers, and we are well on our way to beginning the implementation in this school year, not 5 years from now, this school year, our specialist subject teachers model. Do I get an amen? Amen. Thank you. We're also introducing and implementing a substitute teacher online platform to allow timely request and placement of substitute teachers when needed. We want to discontinue that practice of teachers being absent because they need to take care of a personal matter, and a principal not able to find a substitute teacher, or you have to go pull another teacher and combine classes. Again, an example of looking at a problem, not looking around for who to blame, right? We focus on what is the solution that we can bring to solving this problem. The platform is designed to help the Ministry of Education and schools safeguard teaching and learning contact hours by providing replacement for teachers during unavoidable short periods of absence. It will also enable principals to engage substitute teachers on a needs basis. To qualify as a substitute teacher, a teacher must be fully qualified to teach at the requisite level. Teacher must be of sound character. Teacher must not be permanently employed in the public service. The platform will allow substitute teachers to register for deployment, to identify potential assignments, to respond to requests for assignment logged by the principal, and importantly, to submit the claims for work done, so you get your pay in a timely manner. And I'm going to talk to you more about the MyHR platform that we have begun implementing at the ministry. The substitute teacher online platform will allow principals to request a replacement teacher, select a replacement teacher, verify claims for payment, and appraise the work of the substitute teacher. Let me turn now to communication. This year, let's say since I've been there, myself and Minister Morgan, the ministry has taken on the mission to improve and increase overall communication with our principals and teachers. To date, we've held 5 back-to-school conferences for teachers across 4 regions, with 3 additional sessions scheduled to encourage and inspire our teachers, provide information on the preparation for back-to-school, and to respond to their queries and concerns, as well as to provide a space for them to share suggestions and recommendations. 7 sessions have been scheduled to facilitate early childhood teachers across the 7 regions. We also held sensitization sessions with our principals and board chairmen, with 10 back-to-school conferences across our public and private infant, primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions. These sessions provided a forum for updates and feedback from the respective groups. You will have noticed, I hope you have, that our website, our social media presence have been more active. I'm also sure that our principals are noticing the greater frequency of bulletins. Can you confirm that, Mr. President? We do not want you to hear from the media about things happening in the education sector. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information want to communicate with you, our stakeholders, and we will continue to find ways to do so. I turn now to psychosocial support. Mr. President, you talked about the mental health of our educators. I want to assure you that this is of utmost importance for us here at the ministry. As such, our regional teams will support, facilitate, and coordinate sessions based on the needs identified, with the knowledge that schools with guidance counselors are already designing support sessions through the comprehensive guidance and counseling program. Additionally, online consultations and telecounseling led by the members of the guidance and counseling and special education units respectively will continue as required. Each session will feature strategies and techniques for managing stress and coping with the immediate and foreseen psychosocial changes as a result of the impact of COVID-19 and learning loss experience. The presentations are for specific stakeholder groups and will take into consideration age appropriateness for students. The ability to reach a high percent of our stakeholders has been increased significantly with the decision to host several sessions concurrently via the quality education circles. Guidance counselors and teachers have been training in the return to happiness and will be trained in personal development and empowerment in the 3rd week of August. Principals and board chairs will be trained in self-care and personal recovery in the 3rd to the 4th week of August. Motivational sessions will be held with parents on the topic, Recovering Psychosocially Stronger. Motivational sessions for school staff and students on psycho-emotional support will happen. There will be self-care and psychosocial recovery sessions for regional staff. Cluster-based guidance counselors will be provided to support schools without guidance counselors on their establishment. All of this psychosocial support is available as well to our practitioners in the early childhood sector. Our focus in early childhood will be transitioning more of our basic schools into infants departments attached to primary schools or standalone. 107 basic schools are ready to be transitioned to infant schools. We have more brain builder centers to come on stream. We'll also be focusing on the personal and professional development of our in-service practitioners to better equip them in their interactions with our little boys and girls who are at a very tender and delicate stage in their development. And I know, Mr. President, you talk about being able to assess our students. Well, I'm happy to report that we will continue our age 4 assessments of our boys and girls to identify any learning or developmental issues. Once identified, we will make the intervention during the 2 years, that's between 4 and 6, so that our little boys and girls will show up ready for primary schools. I also want to support you in your call for making education compulsory, starting from age 4. we will do the necessary work and consultations required to make such a change. And while you're calling for that at age 4, I am pleased to announce that our cabinet has approved the 7-year high school. That all our high schools will be required to have 6 forms. And we will be expanding the 6th form program. So traditionally, many of our high schools only focused on students who are going to do their CAPE to go on to tertiary institutions. We want to add 2 more programs. The traditional program, where the student would have only gotten 1 or maybe 2 CSEC. And we also want to have a general program for those students who unfortunately didn't get any CSEC. But at 16 years of age, they are too young to be going out into the work world. They don't have the experience. They don't have the maturity. Keeping them in school, the school that they have attended, for another 2 years will significantly increase their maturity level. They will have the opportunity to repeat their CSEC if they so desire. So those who didn't get any have another chance of trying to get some CSEC subjects. And they will be able to learn, get some skills, so that by the time they are 18, they can make a better decision. They're better equipped to enter the world of work if they so desire. And during the 2 years, we hope that they, like I said, would have repeated their CSEC and be able to get some of that, whether it's CSEC, NCT VET, City and Guilds, or whatever the exam is, and just become more qualified.
Thank you, Minister.
And so you will see us rolling that out over this school year. It will require some planning with our school leaders. We will be providing the support. Already, one of my colleague ministers called me to say his ministry is willing to provide some support for our students, whether it is the uniform or the transportation or the lunch money, right? And I know I have to have a conversation with parents, because I understand that parents are hesitant to continue investment in their children, the ones who didn't pass anything. Especially if that child is a boy, the parent is likely to tell the boy to go find work, go find a construction site. They don't want to invest anymore. The government has to step in. We will begin this year with that program. And by the next school year, sixth form will be compulsory. So our students will be at school until at least age 18. Too many of our students, when they leave high school, are just wandering around, underengaged, on their way to becoming unattached with the education system, 1 foot away to being attached with gangs. We have to rescue our students, our young people. And so again, when I say it's not about looking around to find someone or something to blame, it's about us being bold to take the action that is needed. And this is one such action. I'm going to jump back to early childhood. Sorry, just for a moment, because this is important. In talking about the assessment in the early childhood at age 4, and to announce as well, let me go on to just say that the assessment is currently done, but it's quite manual. But we're working on a process to ensure that it is automated so that we can do the assessment, we can pull together the data, and so our practitioners can have that data to help to guide them in terms of knowing exactly where our 4-year-olds are and how to intervene. So, Mr. President, we're about empowering and supporting our teachers. We all want to see all of our students become high-achieving, high-performing students. We can't just wish that to happen. We can't just wish away the 52% of our boys who are failing in mathematics and the girls who are only doing slightly better. Our objective, like yours, is to see significantly better outcomes for our students. We are on the same side. We succeed or fail together, but I prefer to think that we will succeed together. All right, let me turn now to the efficiency gains that we are seeking at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information in order to serve our teachers better. I know, it's no secret, that the interaction between many of our teachers and the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information can be a disheartening one. You call, nobody answers. You either get into your car or you take a bus and you come to town to see somebody. And you may or may not see them. A lot of times, they're going to lunch. And they leave you standing there, not caring about your issue, thinking that the education sector only exists so they could work in it, so they have a job. But that's not so. We exist to support you, our teachers. And so we're taking steps to change that, to make the interaction between you and the ministry a more pleasant one, a better one. And we're doing that by putting your data in your control. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has commenced the implementation of the MyHR Plus. As part of the implementation process, all human resource and payroll data relating to teachers will eventually become accessible on the system. The key activities are being executed. Already, 17,000 of our teachers were paid utilizing the MyHR system. What that means is the availability of pay slips can be directly accessed by you. You will get, if you haven't already, your user ID and your password, which you will create, and you will be able to access on your own time where you are your pay slip if you need it. You don't have to call anybody anymore. You don't have to visit the regional office. You don't have to come to Kingston. And it's just the beginning of this implementation. We're uploading new teachers' information directly to the MyHR Plus system as of September. We are engaging in the full digitization of personnel records of all active teachers and staff in all public schools. This is expected to be completed by December 2021, after which other services such as printing job letters, checking leave balance, applying for leave, reviewing your file, you will be able to do that and you won't have to call anybody at the ministry. The implementation of MyHR Plus will empower teachers in the management of their employment records, reduce errors, facilitate timely decision-making. The ministry believes that the necessary systems must be put in place to support teachers. As I said, we went live on this in July of 2021. So, teachers, we're calling on you to activate your Google Classroom email address, as this is where login information will be sent. And I want to publicly commend our Permanent Secretary, Dr. Grace McLean, for her leadership on this, and I know that she will stay on it until it's fully implemented. Mr. President, I know you talked a bit about the JTC bill. Where we are now in terms of the teacher appraisal, we're quite happy to say this morning that the JTA has agreed on the use of the appraisal instrument. As you already know, this is not a punitive process. It is a process that's looking to identify gaps so that we can support our teachers. The development of the professional appraisal instrument was initiated with the profession at a multi-stakeholder meeting that was held in 2015. Foremost among the participants was the Jamaica Teachers Association. Since then, the instruments have been subjected to professional dialogue with members of the profession, essentially to ensure processes, quality professional relationships, and evidence-based approaches. The Jamaica Teachers Association remained active in the process over the years and argued for changes that would truly reflect the efforts of our teachers. Most recent among such changes was the need to assess the performance of teachers with special responsibilities while permitting fair assessment of their classroom practice. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, through its schools bulletin, invited the education system to utilize the new appraisal as of September of last year. We are determined that the appraisal of a teacher should not be viewed as punitive, because it isn't. It is developmental. It is to help you. As such, the instrument will remain organic, and its performance in 2020-21 will be reviewed for its effectiveness in identifying the quality of practice of the profession. The success of the appraisal process remains in the hands of the professionals. Each professional appraisal, whether formative or summative, should serve to identify areas of strength and areas of weakness. Peer collaboration is encouraged, and teachers are able to share their areas of strength with their peers and simultaneously pursue programs to improve areas in which their performance may be unsatisfactory. Nevertheless, as the teaching profession adjusts to the changes in the digital space, and those changes accelerated by COVID-19 or any other variant, all professionals are encouraged to pursue annual professional development. The ministry, through the Jamaica Teaching Council, continues to assure a variety of professional development and empowerment programs each year. We will build strategic partnerships with local, regional, and international bodies, as well as non-governmental organizations. We continue to hold high expectations of our teachers and to appreciate the agility of the profession to leapfrog successfully into the utilization of the digital space to assure the education of students as classrooms transform into a place in time and space. I turn now to expenditure. The education sector has had to pivot, as you know, to the online space due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's been learning loss because not all of our students have been able to consistently connect to the virtual classroom. Yet, even while the country has seen a significantly reduced budget, the budget for the education sector remained. For the fiscal year, the budget for the education sector is $114.5 billion, plus an additional $2.8 billion for child protection, as administered by the CPFSA, for a total of $117.3 billion, somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 17% of Jamaica's annual budget. This puts the budget of the education sector second only to that of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, which has a large budget because of debt and interest payment. When you look globally, maintaining the spending in education has not been easy. 2/3 of low and middle income countries and 1/3 of upper middle and high income countries have in fact cut their public education budgets since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is according to the new joint World Bank-UNESCO Education Finance Watch. Despite the heavy financial toll of the pandemic, we have remained committed to the education budget in Jamaica. This speaks volumes about the importance we place on the education sector. I talked a bit about devices already and gave you the promise with regards to connectivity. And let me just say we're making deliberate efforts to ensure that all schools have access to the internet and upgraded bandwidth based on schools' employment and the provision of technological devices. So in so doing, all schools will be supported to continue with their existing internet plans or contracts for the month of September. The ministry, through its National Broadband Initiative, will enter into national procurement of internet supply for 661 schools. The procurement process is at an advanced stage. The ministry will work with other ministries through the interministerial task force that we have to connect 360 schools to the internet using the government's fiber backbone. The assessment of the schools to benefit from this facility has commenced. Already 20 schools have been connected, and I can tell you they don't have the issues that I often hear about. We will continue the provision of affordable educational data plans in collaboration with Flow and Digicel, and we will continue the zero-rated learning websites in partnership also with the providers. I told you already how many devices we would have ended the school year with. Let me touch a little bit on special education. In terms of special education, lessons and curriculum support are provided to all special education institutions by the Ministry of Education Special Education Unit. Tablets, e-resources and applications, accommodation support include the engagement of shadows, caregivers. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, in partnership with the Council for Exceptional Children, have also made online materials available for students with special needs. To date, the Special Education Unit has administered 683 diagnostic assessments to students across all 7 regions. There are 275 shadows that have been assigned to students in need at a cost of $11 million, and 220 students have been placed in special needs institutions at a cost of $44.6 million. Mr. President, I know you spoke a bit about tertiary education and the funding there. In the ministry, we do have some funding to support persons at the tertiary level. $535 million has been earmarked for tuition support program. We launched a platform to facilitate the efficient receipt and processing of applications, and that is working. I support your call, Mr. President, for a complete rethinking of funding of tertiary level education. You said that during your tenure, the JTA will explore with the Ministry of Education a complete rethinking of the methods used to fund education at the tertiary level, and you would also see a need to revisit the funding of the SBL. As an update, a consultancy is underway at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information to do just that, to help us to craft a policy for higher education with a special focus on funding. Given your interests, we would most certainly welcome your thoughts and suggestions. Yes. I do have a few more pages, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, good. All right, so I've spent the morning talking about education in our primary schools or high schools, touch a little bit on tertiary, as I did just now, talk a little bit about the early childhood sector. But I want to just talk for a minute about our child and youth division, because you come in contact with those children. So we're doing quite a bit of legislative work, especially in the Child Care and Protection Act, to address new and emerging issues and to ensure harmonization with other pieces of legislation regarding children. The process is advanced as a draft cabinet submission has been developed to seek approval for the recommendations that were made in the report of the Joint Select Committee of the Houses of Parliament. And as we go through the process, you will hear more details about exactly what those changes are going to be. The ministry has found it necessary to accelerate the pace of the revision of a certain section called Section 24 of the Child Care and Protection Act. And it is that section in which we are saying no child not charged with an offense should end up in a penal institution. We are also saying that the use of the terms uncontrollable, beyond control, out of control, will be abolished in describing children with behavioral issues, to be replaced by modern, defined terminology to capture the range of behavior exhibited by children. And of course, we understand that we have to have the intervention programs in place for those children. And I know that you have some of them in your classrooms. And we don't just want to leave you on your own with those children. We are putting our heads together in terms of how we support you and parents in dealing with those children. We're going to be reviewing the Children Adoption Act to address several legislative gaps and ambiguities. There are areas in which the law can be updated to reflect the scope and types of adoption applications currently being received. The process has begun as the ministry is treating this matter as one in need of urgent attention. This is an important development as it will finally end the practice. Is that right? Okay. The ministry is treating with this matter as one in need of urgent attention. As part of our reform to the child protection ecosystem, we have received approval from the Office of Utilities Regulation to activate 211 as a singular helpline for children at risk or for anyone who wishes to report child abuse. We will be launching the 211 helpline on the 6th of September. This helpline will be manned 24 hours by child care professionals and will be a significant addition to the child protection ecosystem. We will be running a national campaign to inform Jamaicans of this new helpline. We think it's easy to remember. Even a child can call for help using the 211 number. And we will transition to this as the main helpline for reporting child abuse in Jamaica. And I know teachers, you are the eyes and ears on the ground. You see the child when the child shows up late, crying. You have the information that Johnny hasn't been at school for 2 or 3 days. We are going to give you support in providing to the central ministry that information. I didn't talk about it, but we are going to be implementing an attendance app so that you don't have to take attendance the way you've done for hundreds of years. What that will do is it will aggregate the information across the education system. So at the central ministry, we can put in a proper framework to support you so that we have real-time information. So if Johnny hasn't come to school for 1 day, we will know that. And we will be establishing at the central ministry persons to call the parents to say, did you know that your child has not been in school? The parent may say, yes, it's because he's ill or something has happened, right? Or may express alarm that the child has not been in school. That is valuable information for us. Absenteeism from school is an early warning system, an early warning signal that something has started going wrong in the life of this child, and we ought to care as the education sector. Right now, we have just left it up to our teachers. We've kind of thrown it on you, right? For you to report to the principal that XYZ, and the principal to get it to the ministry principal who is so busy trying to do 600 things. So again, Yes, we're going to still ask you to continue to be the watchful eyes and ears for us at the ministry, but to report the information in such a way that it will allow us to put in that support mechanism so we can catch things early before they spiral out of control. And it will say to Jamaicans and to all our children that the ministry, the education sector cares enough for you that we are, on day one, if you're absent, we are going to be in touch with your parent or your guardian. It will take us time to get it all together, but I wanted to give you the sense of where our mindset is currently, right? We have to be known as the caring sector, right? It's our children that we're dealing with.
Colleagues. Colleagues, until the microphone is restored, we have now exhausted the 1.5 hour schedule as per our agenda. Therefore, colleagues, the motion is before us for an extension of this session to facilitate the completion of the minister's presentation by 30 minutes. So moved by Jacqueline, who is that? Gordon Brown? Seconded by Jean Brown. All in favor? Any against? The ayes have it. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you so much for allowing me this additional time. And I'm winding up. But as you can see, I have so much to talk about. It's the first time, I'm here.
I do like the trajectory, Minister.
Huh?
We love the
All
trajectory.
right, good. Good. I have to tell you, as an aside, media, please. When the Prime Minister called me and said, I'm going to send you down to Ministry of Education, I was silent. But I have to say, honestly, since I've been there, every morning I wake up invigorated.
And of course, you have grace with you.
To do the work, to ensure that we improve on the educational outcomes, to have way more students who are performing at a higher level.
Yeah.
And I know we can do it.
Yeah.
You, our teachers, know how. But you've been bogged down with other things. And we're going to de-stress you.
Right.
By all the initiatives that I announced earlier, right? Specialist teachers, this, that, right? So we give you a pep in your step when you go to school. Master teachers and everything like that. Yes. All right, so let me continue in terms of our parenting, guardians, and caregivers. There's clearly a need for a whole of Jamaica approach to caring for our children. There's an urgent need for social intervention and psychosocial support for many of our parents, our guardians, and caregivers. And so we've been working on developing a good parenting campaign. The ministry, through the CPFSA, will be embarking on a positive or good parenting campaign in an effort to empower Jamaican parents to raise happy, healthy, and smart children. We will also be embarking on a non-corporal punishment campaign where parents will be encouraged to try positive discipline. Both campaigns will run for a total of 4 years in separate phases. The ministry is preparing to go to tender to engage a public relations company to lead this effort. We intend to scale up the work of the National Parenting Support Commission to impact more families, And through a relentless good parenting campaign, we want to change the deeply embedded culture of corporal punishment of our children towards more positive, alternative forms of discipline that include removing privileges, time out, talking about why the action was wrong, and reasoning. Our children can reason. It's going to require our parents and guardians to have patience, the patience of Job sometimes, but that we've seen just the negative impact of corporal or physical punishment. We at the ministry, because the CPFSA is there, we get the calls about the abuse in the homes. The CPFSA gets, prior to the pandemic, some 1,200 calls regarding abuse of children per month. Not per year, per month. So we have to re-educate our parents and our guardians. They are damaging the souls of our children. And you see it in your classrooms when they show up. And they come. And sometimes you, the teacher, you are that one person in their lives that is paying any attention to them. We have to change that. And the change begins where? At home and in the minds of our parents and guardians, and ultimately reflected in their actions. And so I look forward to the rollout of that campaign. So I could not complete my presentation without speaking to character education. And I know that Mr. Gabriel is a big supporter of character education. The ministry notes that the JTA embarked on the promotion of value-based education, and we would like to express commendation on this. This is fully in line with the ministry's plans to implement a robust character education program. Character education will become a part of the curriculum in our schools, as it will greatly help with academics by teaching students a sense of diligence. Students will learn how to focus on their studies and have the drive to do well. Character education will teach students how to interact properly with their teachers and other students in and out of the classroom. It will teach them what their behavior ought to be as they leave the schools to go home or as they leave home to come to school. We believe school is a perfect place to teach character education because our students spend quite some time in school. Character education will teach our students a sense of citizenry. Research shows that schools that prioritize character education as part of their curriculum have fewer incidents of disciplinary referrals, suspensions, and truancy. Character education is expected to bring improvement to schools. We will design, develop, and implement the curriculum for character education, and we will give it the same importance we give to literacy and numeracy. Several months ago, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information launched a task force on character education. The task force is designed to facilitate much-needed attitude changes among young Jamaicans to facilitate unity, civility, increase production and economic growth over a sustained period. The immediate past president of the JTA is a member of that task force. And Mr. President, we welcome you. It's the ministry's thrust to remain responsive. Sorry, let me get a little bit more water. It's the ministry's thrust to remain responsive to the changing needs of schools as we aim to support the reforms and rebuilding efforts, as well as to enable and unearth the seeds of opportunities in order for all stakeholders to successfully navigate the new normal. There is much more I could share with you on our transportation support for our students, but I'm going to end on two important points. The first one has to do with an area that the President did talk a lot about, and it has to do with the fees in our schools, the non-mandatory fees. And Mr. President, we've taken a policy decision because we recognize that many of our parents are minimum wage earners, and they just, in a lot of cases, don't have the funds to pay the $15,000 or the $25,000 that schools are requiring of them. And I know this because as an MP, a member of parliament, many of them come to me, they come to Minister Morgan as well to help. And so we want all our school principals to be conscious of this. Yes, we know you need more support at schools, but we're asking you to be in touch with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And one second. Sorry, I just have to put on my mask. Sorry about that. And to be in touch with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And within the confines or the boundaries of our budgets, I know that we will look at your situation and try to help in whatever way possible. So I don't want you to be strident with regards to the non-mandatory fees. I know that there are parents who can afford, and we encourage those parents. But we want you to deal with the situation at hand, not to make our parents feel small, not to prevent the child from coming to school, because education is mandatory, it is compulsory. Our children must be at school. They cannot be prevented because their parents cannot pay the fee. So on my second and last topic, Mr. President, you did talk a bit about that very important process called salary negotiations, through that you are going to be embarked on as the new president. And I remember clearly you saying, it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And I know that well. I was at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service during the time when the teachers were negotiating. Recall I told you about the tablets for teachers. And so I know the delicate nature of it, and that it is only the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service that speaks to this issue. And so it must be, to avoid complications and to avoid just saying things that shouldn't be said. But nevertheless, you called on me, and I did speak to the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, and I've gotten his permission to let you know that a meeting will be held in September.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, teachers all, principals, school administrators, thank you for listening, and I truly, truly look forward to working with all of you. As I said, I am excited, and I'm not just saying that in words. You can ask anybody at the ministry. And there is excitement there at the ministry as well to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish, to ensure we provide the support that you need to be more effective in your classrooms. It will be new and different going forward because of all the initiatives we are putting in place. And we invite your feedback on all of them so that we can modify, we can make changes as we go along. We value you, our teachers. And that is not just words. I'm hoping over the last year you would have seen that, and that you will continue to see that manifested as we go forward into the next school year. Thank you again. God bless you. And before I leave, I want to hand to the President a copy of this book, and it is my sectorial that I presented in Parliament, and it says, it's dated September 15, 2020, which was when I started at the ministry, and on the cover it reads, "Dear Jamaica, our public schools should be ranked among the best in the world. Why aren't they? Yours truly, student." And in it, I laid out, I believe, a pathway to getting us, all of our public schools, our public education sector, to be ranked among the best in the world. But we can't just say that. We have to wake up every day and do the work. And the work to be done is not just to be done by our teachers. It's to be done by the central ministry and its regions, to be done by our parents, to be done by guardians, to be done by communities, to be done by all of Jamaica, so that we have an education sector that when we list the things that Jamaica is known for, the education sector and the high quality of education will be among that list. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Colleagues, we would have heard from our minister. Could we give it up for our Minister for Education and Youth and Information once more? And Minister, I assure you that I will read this book from cover to cover and make sure that we continue the collaboration and partnership. And just to rest your fears, Minister, the President is not indicating that you're casting blame, but in my presentation, rather, that society tend to point finger at us. But we know that you are in the mood, the space, and you have shown the commitment to partner with us. And we are very appreciative, Minister, and we look forward to a very productive and fruitful relationship. Again, the issue concerning fees, I don't believe I asserted that it should be mandatory, because I believe that I would have said that being a poor boy from Rosal, it would have been good if I didn't have to beg my principal then for a break if school fee was free as it is now, but rather based on the fact that the cost of funding education is so extensive, the economy of Jamaica is as it is, then the corporate Jamaica parents and society should come on board with the Ministry of Education to help us provide quality education for our children. Not to say take away the support and reinstitute a mandatory fees. Minister, your presentation was very good, and I leave the vote of thanks to come after. We now invite our colleagues to get behind the microphone. If you, oh Lord, I did not say all the members of the conference should get behind the microphone. And remember, colleagues, Minister, you're very popular, it seems, and everybody wants to talk to our honorable minister. But remember, colleagues, as you align yourself behind the microphone, remember social distancing. And as we have been doing from conference commence, we will take them alternately so that the hotel staff will be provided with adequate opportunity to sanitize each microphone. Colleagues, based on the number of persons who are interested in speaking with the minister, I am asking that each member pose one question. Do not give an introduction. No preamble, just get to the question. Time is against us, and we want all of you to have your chance to speak with our minister today. We'll start with, colleagues, pay attention now. Person at the microphone, my right, your left. And then we go across to Mrs. Gordon Brown, then come back to the next mic. You may proceed. Remember, identify yourself for the record, please.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Rev. Richard Spirit. Based on what you said about all schools introducing the sixth form program, what is in place by the ministry to pay teachers at the sixth form level? Because teaching CAPE subjects, those subjects are really from pre-university. So I know that there presently schools have a challenge with paying teachers. So what systems are in place by the ministry to pay those teachers? Thank you very much.
So, okay, can you hear me? You sure? You sure this is on?
Yes, ma'am, you heard. She's trying to get her mic on.
All right, I know I'm going to have to call on our PS or Chief Education Officer to help me there in terms of the details of the number, but I want to say that traditionally over the decades, sixth form was seen as optional and was seen as being available only to those bright students who want to go on to tertiary institution. As such, other than I think the $60,000 that the ministry provides, there wasn't really a focus on sixth form in terms of resources. What we are doing is taking on board at the ministry, formalizing sixth form education across the education sector. And so I know that already we have identified resources to help this because, well, I should say that's why we're going to use this upcoming school year to roll out the program before we make it mandatory, because we want to ensure that all our schools are ready, when we say go. So I know that, well, sorry, I'm going to ask PS or CEO if you want to put some specifics to the numbers in terms of the support, the resources that schools will have.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, members of the head table and teachers. The question you have asked, I believe you are actually referring to the fact that these teachers will be teaching at sixth form within the secondary level. Yes. The program is so designed and approved as the full 7-year program at the secondary level. And so the existing salary scales that we have for teachers at the secondary level would be what is being considered at this time. As Minister has indicated, this is the implementation base year, and so as we commence the implementation, we will discuss with you if there are any challenges, concerns, and of course we make the adjustments accordingly. At the tertiary level, we have a different arrangement that is currently being worked out with the Council of Community Colleges for that implementation, and of course that will be in collaboration with the secondary level institutions as well, but their salary scales would be different. So that's the base as it relates to the support for teachers. In terms of the support for the program to the schools, I am going to ask our CEO just to outline what is the support being provided for the operations of the program.
Colleagues.
Thank you much, PS McLean. Good morning again to members at the head table. Just to add, colleagues, as PS indicated, and perhaps PS, just to put in context the question, I know in some situations we would have had some schools that would have implemented the sixth form program ahead of the ministry's approval. And so there's an internal arrangement where principals would have compensated some of these teachers differently from how they would have been engaged formally in the government service. So I think perhaps the question is also been asked in that context. But with the full rollout, we would have seen teacher support being provided to our high schools to make sure that our teachers can be adequately and suitably deployed to deliver the sixth form program. So we should not have more or any of those challenges going forward under this approved framework that our minister just spoke of. Additionally, we would have been providing part-time teacher support for some of these institutions that would have been implementing the program and other programs within our schools to make sure that there's there are teachers available even though they are not formally engaged on the establishment. We are also providing our grants, as you are already aware, and those grants are utilized to operate our schools, be it that you need teaching resources for these schools. The grants are used to procure those. If it is that a class set of materials are needed for our sixth form teachers, our principals are aware that the materials should be provided to ensure that the teachers have the resources to plan to deliver As you're also aware, you know the syllabi are available on the website to make sure that you are teaching according to what is expected for the assessments to come. And we continue the dialogue to make sure that you are fully aware. We have some training sessions that were held within the summer here by CXC to make sure that you are exposed to those new syllabi that will be implemented for the new school year.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, please allow me to ask a follow-up question.
Just a minute, though. Colleagues, the 30 minutes that we received permission from conference to extend this session has expired. I see Dr. Anderson moving a motion for the continuation.
Mr. President.
And seconded by Trustee Malloy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against?
Not yet.
Nope.
Ayes have it. You may proceed with your follow-up.
Sure. So you've spoken about teachers. Can we hear about classroom? We have already have overcrowded classrooms, limited school space for additional classes. So how will that be worked on? And plus, there was discussions about extending, taking schools off shift to get full-day schools, and we already do not have enough spaces. How would that be addressed? Thank you.
Okay, with respect to the infrastructural challenges that we have in our high schools, we are fully aware of those challenges. In fact, before we rolled out the sixth form program and the integrated program, we did an audit in our high schools. And we also extended that audit to our tertiary institutions to find where we have additional spaces and capacity to entertain or to support our students in this program. So what we did, in addition to that, is to map those spaces with our high schools. So we have now partnered, as PS indicated earlier, with our tertiary institutions to deliver the sixth form pathway program. So where our high schools are not able to accommodate physically the students on the campus, these students will attend their sixth form program on the tertiary campuses that are in close proximity with these high schools. We have mapped those institutions already. We have had extensive conversations with our principals of our high schools and our principals at the tertiary institutions. They know where they are mapped, and they are presently working through those logistical arrangements to make sure that all our students who are so inclined to register into these programs this year, that they are fully attached and they are fully supported. We have also indicated to our tertiary institutions that staffing support and program support will be provided at that level to ensure that those students are not left out in any way. We have indicated also to our high school principals that they have the opportunity to appoint either a new sixth form coordinator or an assistant sixth form coordinator who will be working along with the tertiary institutions to make sure that those students are provided for, that they are monitored, and that they are fully supported. That's part of the extent of the support that we have been provided to make sure that this program is a successful one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Yes, Mike 2.
Good afternoon, Joycelyn Gordon-Brown, Northwest DA, St. Catherine. What will be done to the large amount of locations that are being used as schools, especially the early childhood children? Some of these locations are very undesirable, and it's full schools operating there. And will there be a campaign against the abuse of teachers by parents and children? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions. In terms of the basic schools and the poor infrastructure that they may have, our plan is to transition basic schools into infant centers attached, or departments attached to primary schools. We know that there are several thousand basic schools out there, but we are going to work on at least 102 of them for this school year to see if we can begin that transition. We know that our the early childhood sector is the important foundation for the education sector, and government ought to play a bigger role in terms of ensuring not just the physical facilities, but that we have properly trained professionals in these entities. There is going to become a time when gone would be the days that somebody just wakes up and decides to have a basic school wherever, right? But because there are so many of them right now, it's going to take us some time to transition all of them. But that's the path that we are on, because we recognize that we have to formalize that area of the early childhood sector, and we just have to be more deliberate about it, because if we do not provide trained professionals who can guide these young children in their tender age, who can relate to them at their level, to understand that you don't just tell the child to go sit down over there, or, or however they deal with them. So that's a long-winded answer, but just to say that the government is seized with the urgency of transitioning that sector to a more formalized sector with trained professionals. And I'm going to ask Minister Morgan to speak to the second question in terms of a campaign to help each other.
Good morning, everyone. So we're very concerned about the issue of discipline within our schools. We recognize the challenges that many teachers have, who in many cases feel as if they are powerless in dealing with behavioral issues. A big part of the reason why we are reforming the Child Care and Protection Act is not just to protect children, but also to create an environment where caregivers and persons who have a higher duty of care are protected from the actions of students and from the actions of parents. Over the last few months, we have had several meetings with the police. We're looking at how schools are going to evolve, where we're saying to schools, well, you cannot use corporal punishment. So we're looking at how we're going to give schools additional tools to assist in the proper instruction and guidance of students. And over the next couple months, you're going to see things like character education, which is going to help. You're going to see a more definitive approach by the ministry in guiding teachers and schools as to what are the disciplinary measures that we think can assist. And you're also going to see a lot of work being done by the ministry through the Child Care and Protection Family Services Agency, the Youth Division, and also working with guidance counselors and principals to see how we can assess some of the serious behavioral challenges so that the teachers do not feel that they are the last barrier between a child's behavioral problem and an intervention. So a big part of the issue is do not force the teachers to feel that if they do not intervene, then there is no other help. To create an environment where other state entities can intervene in the lives of these children in their homes and at the school to assist the teachers in enforcing discipline. There's also, yes, we're training about 60,000 parents, about 97,000, we had said 61st, in terms of assisting them through the National Parenting Support Commission to deal particularly with issues about discipline and how you manage children. A minister spoke earlier about the Good Parenting campaign. We're going to be doing probably a 10-year campaign. Some of you may remember 2 is better than too many. It is a similar approach where we recognize that a lot of the issues related to behavior are generational and cannot be fixed with piecemeal approaches or a one-year campaign, but you have to intervene in the homes, in the schools, in the communities, and in the wider society over a long term. So a lot of this work is taking place, and we'll update you as we continue with them.
Thank you. Mike 1.
Thank you, Mr. President, Conference, Garth Anderson, Trustee. I would like to ask Honorable Minister if she would support, in the context of negotiation, an investment bond, U.S. bond, in the diaspora for 2 to 3 years for teachers representing 20% of the existing salary, as a way of building the teachers' wealth. As you have said, Minister, in Singapore, you would know that teachers are among the best paid civil servants. And 2, the processing of documents. I heard about my HR, but while that is being implemented, and if my memory serves me right, it is going quite slowly, some teachers are suffering from professional abuse by the Ministry of Education, taking 1+ years for teachers to get their salaries, for qualification increments, and you keep calling and calling and calling, and we have evidence of that. Maybe I have suffered from it myself, but I won't say much about that. So there are quite a bit of things to be done where that is concerned about processing. It is very, very bad. Paper gone this way, file cannot be found, the teachers don't call to find out, they don't hear anything. 1+ years. Something must be done. And I connect that with the centralization, decentralization of the Ministry of Education. Too many things must go to Kingston. The regional offices are unable, unfortunately, despite the 2004 task force report, to deal with simple things at the regional level. And finally, the primary specialist program, I want to commend you for that, Minister. But as a principal of a teacher training institution, I would like to know if the relevant staffing will be provided to the institutions to execute the program, which should start, well, it has started already, but the specialization for those teachers will start in September. And we have not heard whether or not those staffing will be provided in order to properly execute the program for both pre-service and in-service.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I will take your first question. I will ask the PS to take on the issue of documents being lost and persons not getting paid for a year. And then I'll ask our CEO to speak to the specialist teachers. So, Mr. Anderson, even though I am a financial person and could possibly answer your question, it would not be proper for me to do so. I would encourage you to give that question to the President so that at the next meeting with the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, that question can come up and be fulsomely answered in that forum. And so that's where I would leave that question that you've asked about, issuing this bond for teachers.
Okay, so Dr. Anderson, as it relates to the specific matter you raised about the professional abuse, as you call it, of teachers, I will be the first to admit that we have had many challenges over the years regarding the processing of teachers' documents. For those who are not aware, once you join the profession, there is a special file that is created for you, which commences with your 503 form and your birth certificates and other documents. And I believe the longer you are in the profession, the bigger the file becomes. And that's the file that is used through the system, whether you are in Westmoreland or you're in Kingston, wherever you are. And that's what is used to determine how we work, for example, on your seniority allowance. That's what is used to, well, increment is a little automatic at the beginning of the period. It is used also to determine, let's say, leave, for example, your eligibility for leave, and for other special needs of our teachers. There are documents that are added at different times. So if you have gone and you have gotten your master's, your PhD, then the documents are submitted on the files. I must say that it has been an administrative nightmare just for the processing of these files. And whenever we have any kind of natural disasters, hurricanes in some cases, in another case there was a major accident, so the files do get misplaced. I will also admit that we have had some instances of inefficiencies just in terms of the processing from the school to the regional office to whatever computation is to be done within the regional office and submission to central for payment. So we admit, colleagues, and on the ministry's behalf, I do apologize for all these issues. That's the reason we are moving in overdrive to ensure that the MyHR Plus system becomes a full reality. It's a very flexible system, and it will rid us of all these challenges. We are pushing now for all new teachers, once they become a member of your staff in whenever the CEO gives permission, that their documents are uploaded on MyHR Plus. The documents can be uploaded by themselves, by the teacher, verified by the principal, accessing on the system, accessed at the regional office and verified, and then it goes to the next leg. So we are not wasting any time. We are starting there with the new teachers. We are 75% complete in terms of the files of the 25,000 teachers that we have. It's not only to scan and get the documents on the system, but it's also to do the verification that all the pertinent documents are there, because the system is preset to calculate your leave, to calculate the different allowances, and you know the myriad of allowances that we have within the school system. So we have to do this with a level of diligence. We have over 120 young people working at this. They have to be supervised closely. And that is why we are saying by the end of December, we would have completed this process. And then you can now go on and you will be able to check your leave balance. You will be able to check if all your documents are there. You will be able to verify, and we will now be able to use the information to determine whether you are due your seniority allowance or you are to get a qualification allowance or whatever is the unique case for each teacher. So, colleagues, I think this is a major step in the right direction. And while we know that it is not perfect now, I do ask for your patience as we embark on this most important step. Our minister has directed regional meetings with our teachers. We have had about 5 so far, Dr. Chu. We have 2 tomorrow, I think Region 4 and Region 6. And as the teachers speak in the chat and to us, we note what they have spoken about, and we try to update and to treat with those issues specifically as they are given to us. So we are not lying down and just waiting on the system to just fix everything. We are aware that there are some issues that we have to directly fix at this time. And we are committed to ensuring that all these matters are fixed. Dr. Anderson, on the matter of the decentralization, I cannot go against the policies and the directives at this time. There are a number of processes that are far more efficient. For example, when we transfer the grants to the primary schools' accounts and you get it readily, it prevents you from having to take a bus to the regional office to go and pick up a check and then to sign the check and to take it to the bank, to lodge it in an account and to start paying. So that would start your operation. So that process would take maybe about 2 weeks. Now the primary schools, all 762 of them, they get the funds directly in their accounts. and they are paid. So there are some areas that, based on the opportunities we have for use of technology in making our services far more efficient, there are some services that are going to remain centralized based on the policy directives that we follow. However, we continue to train our 7 regional directors so they understand the policy, they understand the policies and the procedures of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and they can guide you at the local level so that you can access services at a faster pace. Thank you, sir. CEO. Senator.
Don't know if the PS would be kind enough to respond to the specialist program, the primary specialist program.
CEO will do it,
okay.
Sir.
Thank you so much. Dr. Anderson, just for background, as Minister said earlier, we are rolling out this program starting this year, and there are several components to the program. So within our primary schools for September, we have 238 of our primary schools that will be ready to implement this program, and then we have another 98 that will join in January. So to make that program successful, we have to enter into some pre-service and in-service training to make sure that the teachers have the capacity to deliver well. So for teachers who will be engaged for this year, we are working through with the University of the West Indies to have them enter into in-service training that will culminate with a postgraduate diploma for our teachers. So it's not just training, but recognized certification for our teachers who will be implementing and working with the ministry for this. In addition to that, we have to make sure that our teachers who are coming into the profession, they come prepared. So we have gone into discussion with our colleges to make sure that we revise and review the B.Ed program in primary. That would mean that some additional hours, working hours, teaching hours will be increased for our lecturers, and so additional support may be necessary in the teachers' colleges to make sure that this become a reality. So we have a submission, Dr. Anderson, from the colleges to look at this, because more hours in the specialized areas will mean more demands on your lecturers. So we are reviewing this for a determination to be made, but we stand very willing and ready to support what is required, because we really do not want to be running behind our teachers when they come out, but rather to have them come prepared. So for the primary diploma, the degree rather, the teachers will come with their specialization ready to seek their engagement in the primary schools going forward. So we are reviewing the submission doc, and we will have further discussion to see how best we can support the needs of the colleges in making this a reality.
While the lovely CEO is still at the podium, if we are about midway August, if we are going to get staffing, I can't see how we don't know yet, because the students are in the second year. They are going to specialize, and as a principal, and I speak on behalf of my other colleagues, we are still at sea. Something must happen now to say to us, you are getting X or Y, because college will start in a few weeks' time.
And Dr. Anderson, you have our full commitment. We will make sure that you hear from us expeditiously, given the fact that school will start very soon. So I understand the challenges that you're having, and we will be working with our colleges to make this a reality. As you would have heard from our minister, this is a program that is here to stay. This is going to be revolutionizing our primary sector and making sure that we get the outputs that we desire from the education system. So we will be in touch with you, sir, and other members of the colleges. Thank you.
Colleagues, just to share with you that the fact that we are really strapped for time. If we look at your clock and look at our program, and we want to ensure that everything we do is in order. Therefore, Madam Minister, I crave your indulgence in allowing us to take 3 questions, and then we answer and we move as best as possible to ensure that we facilitate our members to the best of our abilities. Okay. So we'll make a correction. 2, so that the mic can be sanitized. All right, so we take 1, 2, and do it like that. Okay, go ahead. Just pose your question, and then the minister will make a note of it. Next question from mic 1. After that, answer we give her, then we continue. Go ahead, Mr. Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sean Vaughan, St. Jago District Association, St. Catherine, Jamaica Association of Guidance Counselors in Education. Honorable Minister, thank you for your presentation. I've heard your response to the diagnostic test generally, but I'm wondering how will it be filtered down into individual schools? Because the results would have given you a message about specific schools. How will that result now be applied to their schools? And 2, I heard the push for the psychosocial support. As a psychosocial support specialist, I am asking what message have been given to the principals to give support to the specialists during this change in dynamics. Thank you.
Mike 1, you may pose your question.
Thank you. Mark Malava, St. Thomas District Association. One quick comment, Minister. We had low levels of vaccine take-up, high levels of vaccine hesitancy, the Delta variant on the rise globally, yet the decision was taken to open up the country in the way that it was done. That decision in and of itself, Honorable Minister, has caused an entire education system to be pushed back by virtue of the fact that we cannot go face to face. And it begs the question as to the extent to which education is a priority in the country. I'm asking, Minister, that we become more strident in protecting the interest of the education system. The second question, the question that I really want to ask, Minister, is in your budget presentation, you spoke about returns on investment. Within that context, have we determined what is the unit cost to educate a child in Jamaica at the primary level, at the high school level, and at the tertiary level? And within that context, how does the budget stack up against that unit cost? Thank you very much.
And then we're going to be asking questions.
Go ahead.
So,
Minister,
yes,
you can go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Vaughan, Guidance Counselor, CEO, I'm going to ask you to speak to Psychosocial Report in terms of what message to send to principals. In terms of the diagnostic tests that are done right now in the early childhood sector, this is what I thought I heard. How is that filtered down? And so I know right now the unit at the ministry is working alongside with our professional who is responsible for the administration and the analysis of the test in order to get the results for each of the schools. What I did say when I was speaking is the manual nature of it currently and the need to automate this test so that once it's completed, we're able to get that data to do the analysis, and that's what we will be working towards. CEO, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but if you could speak to the psychosocial support, what message to principals?
Okay, thank you, Minister. So just to add a little bit about the diagnostic. So we have indeed, Sir Vaughan, shared the results of a diagnostic assessment with our schools, and we have also sent the diagnostic test results for our grade 6 students to the high schools that they have been placed. So additional information is available to plan for those students' learning program. We have sent out a manual to guide the interpretation of the scores to all our schools, and we have sensitized those teachers who have participated in our conferences and dialogues. We would have spoken to them. The regions have been having conversations with our teachers and principals, and we have also spoken to our principals about the test. We sent out subsequent to that a framework to guide how the results should be utilized in grouping our students for learning. So you would have heard our minister spoke earlier about the National School Learning and Intervention Plan. The diagnostic test is a major component of that because it is the information from that test that will help to organize the grouping on the ground. We have sent out how to use the descriptors concerning the grouping and what kind of resources would have been made available for those students. At the early childhood level, we continue. We never had the assessment of the age 4 assessment last year and the year before, but that is now going to be migrated into the E-frame and making sure that that becomes available in electronic format for the sitting in the next year of this academic, next 2022 year, which is part of this academic year. So we continue to work with that. The officers have been trained. We have within our regions education officers who have been exposed to the data, and they have been working with our principals to make sure that the information is utilized in organizing, because that's very, very key in making sure our students can move from where they are. The gaps have been identified, and we want to make sure that those gaps are addressed before the new information is added. We have even sent a summary within each school to see how many students would have fallen into near ready or not ready in different subject areas on that assessment, to make sure that the clinical data is available for our students and for our teachers to plan. So that kind of communication has been extensive, and even now, as persons prepare for back to school, our officers are available within the staff development sessions that we will be having within the last week of August to the first week of September, as per usual, to make ourselves available. Our assessment officers are available, and our core curriculum officers are available to support our schools in that regard. As it relates to the psychosocial component, we have had extensive activities in this area. And I know you have spoken specifically to the specialists, so the counselor, who counsels the counselor. Am I interpreting you correctly, Sean? I think that's where you're going, because you are fully aware as a counselor what we have been doing for the system.
Directive to the principals in reference to the support given to the counselor on the ground. For example, asking me to call all the parents, and you don't give me the requisite support to call all the parents.
So the resources to enable you. Okay, and I think, PS, we actually had a question from a principal in one of our consultations that spoke definitively to that. And so we would have indicated to our principals, like all other programs, when we send the grants, and I know you would have heard from Principal Malava that it may not be adequate. But what we have done over the years, we would have assisted our principals in reallocating and allocating appropriately the budget that we send. So in the same way we ask our principals to make sure that resources are available for teaching and learning, we have said to them, ensure that there's a budgetary allocation for programs. So the guidance program is a major part of the operational activity and student support in our school, and so it must be covered in the budgetary allocation. We have heard from our principal in just recent times that we need to look at a separate allocation for our guidance and counseling department, and our PS had indicated that she will look at that to see how best we can make sure that some kind of specialized support is sent directly to our school to enable the guidance program. But as it is now, we have made a plea to say, in the event that things are very critical at your school, reprioritize, because no more than ever before, the psychosocial support is very important. And we have asked our principals to give that prominence and pride of place in the resumption plan. And we will again, Sean, appeal to them to make sure that this is done, because we know critical recovering psychosocial is stronger, is important this year for our boys and girls. So we are looking to the specialized support as requested by our principal, but we will reiterate the need for priority of place for psychosocial at this time.
Yeah, take the vaccine.
Oh, yeah, right.
One more question.
While that is going on, I want to answer the question that you had posed about the return on investment. We don't, I know the PS has some of the numbers in terms of the dollars. What I do have available to me right now is a study that was done by the World Bank that looked at a per student expenditure as a share of GDP per capita. And it looked at it broken down by pre-primary education, primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. And what we do see is that as a share of GDP per capita, our tertiary institutions have the highest share at 35%, secondary schools would be 26%, primary schools 18%, and our pre-primary, which is our early childhood sector, 9%. So there is, 7%. I'm not sure if that's the kind of information you're looking for, or you're looking for a dollar or a percentage figure, but that's what I have available to me right now. But we could, if needed, look into it some more, and maybe we could have a follow-up discussion.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may, Minister. The question that I'm asking does not necessarily have to do with GDP and percentage. If you look at international models, for example, in Finland spends roughly 1.7 million Jamaican dollars per student. Which is 3 or 4 times more than what we spend per student. So I am asking the question within the context of, have we done any research in terms of unit cost, and how does that stack up against the budget? Because I believe, Minister, if we're talking about the budget and the spend on education, that is where we need to start in terms of identifying that unit cost and then find the resources to fund the education budget. So that was where I was going, because if we use that model in terms of percentage of GDP, then the education system in terms of funding would not be adequate given the realities that exist on the ground.
All right. We'll follow up with you on that point.
Thank you, Minister.
The technical nature of it. All right. Minister Morgan, if you could speak to the question regarding prioritization of education sector vis-a-vis the levels of vaccine.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much, Mr. Valava, for the question. We consider this question a very important question, as it gives us an opportunity to articulate what we have done over the last year as it relates to COVID. Just to re-enumerate what you said, you spoke about the pushing back of education in favor of other sectors in the economy. You asked the question as to whether education was a priority for the government, and you're saying that we should be more strident in protecting the education system. I will start by answering your question by laying out the framework as to what we have done. Essentially, when we became ministers on September 15, one of the first things we established was the e-COVID task force, which was a broad bringing together of stakeholders to chart a way forward for the opening or management of the education system. It included members of the Jamaica Teachers Association as well, and the decisions that we made as it relates to the education system was based on consensus. It had the private sector, the Early Childhood Commission, the Jamaica Teachers Association, the Independent Schools Association, and several other stakeholders. And this was a high policy direction, not just from the Ministry of Education, but also from the level of the Cabinet as to the importance of this initiative. As it relates to now, the government of Jamaica has negotiated 600,000 vaccines exclusively for our students. We know that we have over 500,000 students. We also ensured that teachers were made priority during the vaccination campaign. and were given prime position to receive vaccines. Our students also reflect one of the lowest rates of infection of COVID, and we're able to do this by looking at when we had periodic face-to-face and how many infections were within our schools and how much were not in our schools based on the general population. Over the last year, we have spent several $1 billion on providing sanitization and other resources to schools. We're going to spend $1.6 billion for this school year, and we spent a similar amount last year in improving infrastructure, assisting schools with doing isolation units, instructions on social distancing, and so on. We're also spending hundreds of millions of dollars in assisting our students with learning in terms of the television programs that we do, in terms of the learning kits that have been produced, in terms of what has been in the newspapers, in terms of giving students access to technology. We have issued over 140,000 tablets at the cost of several $1 billion. The last point I want to make to you as it relates to prioritizing education versus other sectors. The fact of the matter is, we cannot pay teachers unless we earn taxes. 80% of our foreign exchange disappeared when our hotels closed. That's where teachers' salaries come from. When factories are closed, government is not able to get revenue to fix our schools. The issue is not about whether or not we have prioritized education over other things, is how are we going to create a balance to ensure that, like over the last period, no teacher was sent home or no public sector person lost their job because the government could not pay them. There were many other industries within the society where people went home because their bosses could not pay their salaries. We ensured, based on the fiscal management of the government, that our teachers had job security and our schools had the necessary resources to deal with the different modalities to ensure that even though we were not able to do face-to-face across the entire sector, some of our students, a large number of them, still had access to education. So the point I'm making to close is that COVID is the worst challenge Jamaica has faced since independence. There is no template to deal with COVID. Over the last 2 years, the country has had to figure out how are we going to manage the education sector, how are we going to manage the health sector, what are we going to do with the tourism sector. And we've had to, in many cases, attempt things, consult with our stakeholders, and try to do them better than we did before. But the one thing that we're confident about here at the Ministry of Education and at the cabinet level is that at every step of the way, one of the biggest concerns we've had within the government is how do we keep our teachers safe, how can we educate our children, and how can we ensure that when we do have the opportunity to open back our schools, we can do it in a safe and sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Okay. Colleague at mic 1, not mic 1, sorry, mic 2. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Leighton Johnson, Delegate, Queen of Spain Valley District Association. Minister, school administrators were cautioned against employing the term-by-term approach to engaging teachers in positions that were available for a year. Over the last period, we have seen that the Ministry of Education has embarked on this particular model. Can you speak to the ministry's position on the engagement of teachers on a term-by-term basis where the position is available for a year? And secondly, in terms of the tablets that were distributed to students, we realize that in many instances, the issue of connectivity still remains on the basis that the tablets are standalone devices. Is there any plan by the Ministry of Education to now re-engage another company to get tablets that can use SIM cards so students can have, or students would be in a better position to have connection to the internet? Thank you.
Sure. I'll take your second question last with regard, I'll take your second question first, sorry, with regard to tablets to students. And yes, as the technology evolves, as we make additional procurement, we will ensure that we buy the latest technology. I know that some of our procurement efforts started very early on, and having tablets with SIM card was not a requirement at the time. But as we evolve and as we do additional procurements, we're going to ensure that the issue of connectivity or tablets that can use SIM card will begin to be the purchase that we make. And I'm going to ask our PS to deal with the term-by-term approach to employing teachers.
Okay, so lately we are all aware here of the arrangements in terms of staff. If I may start with teachers who are on study leave, for example. As CEO just reminded me, those teachers would be going off, some for a year, some for 2 to 3 years. Those teachers can be employed for the period that the teachers are going to be off on study leave for. Now, we understand how it goes in terms of our permanent teachers, and they are employed, if they're employed for September, the term is usually from September to the end of August. Now, colleagues, I have to say to you that the compensation budget is finite. And so we have to make sure that we manage the compensation budget. We are under very strict instructions. We do not vary to or from compensation. And that is because we have to ensure that we support the fiscal policy of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. So as it relates to temporary teachers and temporary staff to support the dynamic situations that we have at this time, we cannot and are not in a position to employ these teachers for an entire year. I am not sure what the positivity rate is today, but this is something that we get every day. About 3 weeks ago, we perhaps were at about 7% or less, and we were quite excited as we planned for the beginning of the school year and to start seeing our students on the 6th of September. Fast forward to today, it's a totally different situation in terms of the variance and where we are in terms of the increase in the number of cases. We do not know what is going to happen in September, neither October, November, nor December. And so, to make sure that we manage the budget, we are not in a position to give you permission to employ a teacher to assist in terms of the specific unique cases at your school for September to August of next year. We are not in that position. CEO will advise you that for every single teacher that is employed, we have to sit down and match the teacher that is employed against the budget that we have. And we have broken it down region by region, and the regions also have to do the same thing. We have seen cases, and CEO was very good at working this through, where there were teachers who were employed for 1 year. And we then had to ensure that we find meaningful engagements for those teachers for the period where they were not needed to continue what they were doing in the first term. So, Leighton, my colleagues, I do understand your situation, but gone are the days when you could employ a teacher for September, a temporary teacher, and you keep the teacher until August. We can only employ the teacher or the cleaner or the janitor for a specified period. And so, because there is no certainty now, we have decided, let us do this on a term-by-term basis. So we are willing to work with you, willing to support you, but as I've always said, I don't want, when I have to go down to PAC, you're there praying for me while I'm answering the questions. I want you to help us right now to manage the finances that we have, to make sure we can effectively account for the bodies that we are placing in your schools. We can pay them, and we minimize the bad publicity of teachers being employed in the school for 6 months without being paid. Those are some of the reasons why we had those challenges. Teachers were employed for a specific period, September to December. We removed them from the payroll, and in March we hear that the teachers have continued. Some of the teachers, and I understand their situation, even volunteer that they will stay on. And then they tell Mr. Farquharson that they have been there for how many months, and they have not been paid. Now, we are not in a position to say to the public that you have employed the teacher and permission was not given for the second term. We have to go behind doors and work it through, ensure that the teacher is paid, and say to you in private, we cannot use this approach. So, our teachers, I'm just asking you to work with us to manage this system. Everything has to be accounted for, and we have to make sure that we do not exceed the compensation budget that has been provided by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. So we are doing our best to support, but please understand that there has to be fiscal prudence in managing the finances that we are provided with at this time.
Thank you, PS. Mike 1. And remember, colleagues, let me give you some information. It is now 12:25, and we cannot go beyond 12:30. Yes. If you pay attention to our document and the standing orders, if we do, we will be breaching our own rules, for which later it can be said it has no standing. And therefore, colleagues, we have to manage the process carefully to ensure that we operate within the ambit of our own rules and regulation. So, colleagues, please, quickly, just drop your question, and we see how best we can get them answered. Mike 1.
Norman Johnson, Delegate White House DA. Mr. Minister, the rotational approach was in place last year as a means of meeting the learning needs of students. However, there were many students who have deferred doing their exams because of lack of confidence in doing well. Has the ministry done an assessment to determine the strengths and weaknesses of this approach as a means of ensuring that the problem we had last year, in terms of the academic year, in student deferring will not occur? Secondly, you mentioned the need to put specialist teachers in place in the primary. It is well discovered and known that many of the learning challenges that have emerged at the primary school level and upward had been diagnosed from the early childhood or infant schools. I'm asking, is the ministry committed to ensure that specialist teachers are provided at that level, that infant level, that primary basic school level, and the material resource to ensure that the learning disabilities and challenges that are emerging at the primary school level and upward are corrected and done away with, if that is possible.
Colleagues, before the minister and the other person come, I really do not wish to have to stop anybody. Just ask the question. Just one question, because our other colleagues need to have their questions brought to the fore. And if you're going to go into a preamble and all sort of thing, I'm going to stop you. Question two. Mic two.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Minister, is there any plan in place to get the ratio at the infant level and is there any plans in place to have the Ministry of Education and the Early Childhood Commission come to a consensus as to the teacher-pupil ratio? It is getting increasingly frustrating for principals of primary and infant schools to get our schools certified. Thank you.
All right, sure. CEO, would you like to take the question on the ratio of students? And you can just deal with the specialist teacher at the ECC. But let me just say, in terms of the question about the deferral of exams, it was an option that CXC offered to our students this year because of the pandemic. Students did not have to defer. It was their choice if they felt that they were not adequately prepared. And you will note that the ministry is ensuring that those students are adequately provided for at the school so that they can do their exams next year, either January or June of next year. And those plans, I'm sure the CEO as well could speak to it, because we recognize that we're in a pandemic. Not all our students were ready to sit the exam, and we made this facilitation, and we know that we have to be there to provide additional support. Please go ahead, CEO.
Thank you, Minister. So, as Minister said earlier, we continue to provide the support for our students who would have deferred their assessment occasioned by the pandemic. It's a facility that was made available to all our students across the Caribbean, and we also took opportunity of that. And yes, we have been working with our schools to make sure that those students who would have deferred, that they are fully supported in their resumption of learning for the new school year. We have already looked at the data. We have shared the data with our regions and our schools. We are in dialogue with OEC, so we have the numbers per subject area and so forth. So we have looked at that. We have modeled that, create a model to support those students based on the number of students in each school and per subject area. And we would have indicated to our principals that support would have been provided based on how these students need to be grouped. Some students, we have indicated to our principals, would need to be promoted based on the number of subjects that they would have sat. Some students, based on the number of subjects they would have deferred, they will be offered an opportunity to repeat that year because they would need additional support. Other students will be integrated in the timetable program to make sure that they are supported to do the one or the two subjects that they would have deferred. We have also said to our principals that we are providing an online platform to make sure that the students are supported. So in addition to the face-to-face contact, which may be limited, we have put together a platform which we will be launching. We have indicated to our principals already. We are populating that platform with educational materials for the different core areas that we would have seen majority of our students would have deferred in, both at the CSEC and at the CAPE level. So we continue to work with our students. We have had conversations with our principals to look at the rotational approach. It might not be ideal at this time, but it is something that we have to include in our arrangement because of the limitations within our physical space. So there's no way that we can accommodate all our students given the 3 to 6 feet distancing that is required to keep everyone safe. As a result of that, we will have to rotate. So based on our preliminary assessment, we have indicated some changes with that. For our primary level, based on assessment, we realized that the 1 week off, 1 week on may not be the ideal approach coming from our principals with respect to the review of the strategy. And so we'd have indicated to them that the rotations be limited to 1 to 2 or 3 days for at the primary level, because the long period of disengagement from a teacher would not be instructive for them. We would have researched that, we would have discussed that with our principals, and we would have sent that information out in our bulletins to advise how we organize learning on the ground. So we have been listening, we have been reading, we have been assessing, and so some new information would have been provided to guide how the rotational approach will be set up for our students for the new school year. With respect to the early childhood and the specialist approach, you know, colleague teachers, that we have a series of assessments in our program of education here in Jamaica. So Minister spoke earlier to the H4. The H4 assessment is really an assessment to identify and detect learning challenges and behavioral challenges from very early. When that assessment is done by our infant schools and our basic school teachers, those students who are identified with delays, those persons are referred to our Early Childhood Commission for further assessment and work to be done with those students and their parents. Where that intervention doesn't work, there is another level of referral that is done by ECC. It's called a tertiary level of referral, where these students and their parents are given further clinical support by specialists. All of this happens before they are integrated at the primary level. When they transition to the primary level, we know that we administer the grade 1 individual learning profile. And that assessment is another level of information that guides how learning is organized on the ground to support those boys and girls, our pupils. So that's the kind of clinical makeup that we have in our education system. And as the students progress, you know, of the grade 3 diagnostic, that information again is used to group our students, and that all of this happens under our proficiency pathway in education. And so there are pathways where persons are stopped, where persons are grouped, where persons are assessed using our clinical services. You're aware that we have an EdPsych, a ClinPsych, a diagnostician, and a special needs coordinator in our educational regional office to assess with further assessment of our students. They deal with the post-assessment with our parents, and we do pull-out sessions and pull-out programs within our primary schools for these students. Minister indicated earlier where we need additional clinical specialized work for these students. They are placed in separate schools. And Minister said earlier that we are spending $45 million this year in placing those 220 students who have been identified with special needs and need further clinical support that the normal mainstreaming cannot support. So yes, we have a suite of work going on in the field, and we are listening and we are adjusting our budgets and our program to support all our students. And for the racial issue, I am not aware, Minister, that we have a challenge with the ECC on this. We have been fully supporting our early childhood institution to make sure that they can be certified. In fact, the ministry engaged an officer this year that is just working solely on certification. So we have indicated approval for the 1 to 20 ratio at the early childhood level. That's 1 teacher, 1 caregiver for every 20 group of students. And that is something that we have fully supported over the years. So where there are misunderstandings on the ground, we will have to work with ECC to correct this. But the full support is there. The funding is given to ECC to support this. And our regions are providing the support in that regard. So it's 1 to 20. 1 teacher, 1 caregiver for every group of 20 students at the early childhood level, and we continue with a similar ratio. We have the 1 to 20, 1 to 25, 1 to 35, and so forth, going up as we staff our schools at the primary and secondary level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Troop. Colleagues, I invite you, before we even go any further, to turn to page 10 in your reporter. Could you please just turn to page 10 in your reporter? We are now at 12:30. We have not yet completed the 8th session of conference. We are woefully behind time. And if we are to execute the 9th and 10th session of conference, you can understand the dilemma we are now facing. Therefore, colleagues, I am suggesting to you that in considering the next motion for an extension, we bear those parameters in mind. So, is there a motion for an extension for half an hour, and that's the final half an hour extension? 15 minutes. Just a minute. The motion for the extension for 20 minutes is before conference. Is there a mover? Moved by Dr. Anderson, seconded by Stephanie Wright Grant. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and we close this session at the completion of this allocation of time. Mike
1.
Mike 1, proceed.
Good afternoon, Marlene Gordon-Reed, Queen of Spain DA delegate, and the Jamaica Association of Guidance Counselors in Education. My first question is, with the
Proceed, madam. One question. So
with the task force that was developed, as mentioned by the Minister, on character education, my question is, has the Jamaica Association of Guidance Counselors been consulted in this, and is the guidance unit a part of this initiative?
Mike 2.
Yeah. Yes, I can say the guidance unit at the ministry is a part of it, and we could easily add a representative from the association to be on it. So we will send out that invitation and we'll action that.
Mike 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Judy Powell, President, Upper St. James District Association. I am asking you kindly, Honorable Minister, to give some consideration to my school board's request for a security officer or watchman for Springfield Primary and Region 4 St. James. Our school was newly built in 2009, and in 2013, the security officer was taken away because the region said it had no funds. We have been writing since then, especially during COVID, and we have not got a response to date. As a principal, I have to open the gate myself, or my teachers or my students. And in September, we are going to have to do so much more. The main gate is so far from the main building, it's very difficult for us all. Please, Minister, give some consideration to Springfield Primary in St. James, Region 4. Thank you.
Okay, Springfield Primary, Principal of Springfield Primary, or PS, is making note of that, and I will certainly follow up with her.
Mike 1.
Great afternoon, everyone. Violet Thomas Thompson, President of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Infant and Primary Schools. Madam Minister, you alluded to the fact that we on the ground have the know-how. We're humbly asking for a seat at the decision-making table so we can have better collaboration.
Mike 2.
Good afternoon. Jermaine Williams, Westmoreland Parish, delegate. Love teaching. My resources are stretched. Laptop died a natural death less than 2 years. How soon we'll get some laptop support? Thank you.
Minister? Minister, 2 questions before you.
Yeah, sure. Ms. Thompson, in terms of wanting a seat at the table for decision, we'd love to speak with you to find out exactly what area that you desire to be at the table. All right, so we'll follow up with you. In terms of laptops for teachers, again, since this year, I've articulated that support for laptops. We have to now put a program together, go out and search for the resource to make it happen. But it's something that we are committed to. I won't be able to give you a date and timeline here right now, but it is a real commitment to our teachers to get, it's your working tool that you should have.
Mic 1.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Ramona Bromfield, General Counsel. I want to congratulate you, Madam Minister, on the acceptance of the President's view of making education compulsory from age 4. I would also like to point out that we do not have a challenge with access, which could be solved by legislation. What we have is a challenge with is funding. Will you, as Minister, promise to improve the quality of the offerings at the early childhood level by facilitating their greater exposure to trained teachers? Thank you.
Mic 2. Your question?
Good afternoon, Eton McNamee, General Counsel. Would the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, be averse to signing a memorandum of understanding with our union, which will state that once the teacher or the parties concerned have satisfied the requirements in submitting papers and documents to the ministry, once that has been satisfied, within 3 months after that, if payment is not made to the individual, will the ministry agree that that payment start attracting an interest on behalf of the teachers in light of the inflation that we are faced with?
Mic 1, quickly.
Good afternoon, Pansita Walker, General Counsel. With regards to specialist teachers at the pre-primary level, meaning grades 1 to 3, I'm asking you, Madam Minister, is there anything in place that only primary early childhood trained teachers be placed and not primary trained teachers, preferably teachers already working also at the school, as children at that level need nurturing and not so much to teach and go?
Okay, Minister.
Okay, so I think it was Mr. Broomfield or Ms. Broomfield that asked about Ms. Broomfield having trained teachers at the early childhood level?
Yes.
More. Okay, CEO, can you help me out there on that one in terms of the plan going forward? With regards to the next question about the MOU with the unions, what we've talked about this morning in terms of the My HR system that we're putting in place should be able to alleviate the problems of document transfer from teachers to the ministry, and it should help to shorten the time for verification of the payment that needs to be made and all that. And I believe that we are going to get to that point where such an MOU will not be needed because we have the system in place. You have more control over your data. You can see your document that was uploaded. You'll be able to see who has actioned your document and where in the process it is. So for now, we're going to depend on technology to help us to solve that problem rather than an MOU with the union. CEO?
Okay, thank you, Minister. With respect to the trained teachers in our primary infant schools, so for what I'm aware of, Minister, is that we have an arrangement with our basic schools, our early childhood institutions. Over the years, we have tried our very best to improve the quality of teaching at this level, knowing that the students need to come stimulated and prepared. So we have an arrangement in place where established institutions can write to the Early Childhood Commission or even to your regions to express interest in having a trained teacher assigned to your institution to make sure that the quality is maintained. So we do have that arrangement. So if it is that you do not have a trained teacher on your staffing at your early childhood institution, please write to the ECC and we will see how best we can support you with that. So we had made some commitment some time ago to make sure that there is at least one trained teacher in a basic school until we're able to fully modernize the early childhood sector, which we have started to do. Minister would have indicated earlier that from the ECC assessment that was done, we have 107 of those schools that are ready. We have full commitment to modernize 14 of those schools in September, and another 30 of those schools will come on in January, which means that we will have quality, qualified trained teachers in those institutions to prepare to make sure that the stimulation is appropriate for readiness for the primary level. At the primary schools where we are establishing the infant departments, I suspect that that's where the teacher is speaking from with respect to having redeployment taking place in those institutions, where a primary trained teacher would have been redeployed to work at the infant level or so forth. Sometimes that does happen in some of our schools because of the staffing that is in our school. It is not prudent or fiscally prudent for us to give an additional staff when there are teachers in those institutions that are underdeployed. And so the principals have that responsibility to make sure that the teachers are suitably deployed, and then where there are gaps, the ministry will support. So what we have indicated to our principals, where teachers have to be redeployed, is for retooling to take place. So you may be working at an earlier level. It does not mean that we can't build your capacity to deliver at that stage. And so professional development sessions will be developed for you to make sure that you are retooled. The ECC will be working along with you to make sure that you're exposed to the curriculum that they have available for those students, and ongoing support will be provided. But we have to utilize the staffing support in a prudent way, because we can't just have persons in our schools that are not suitably deployed, that are underdeployed, and we keep giving and adding. It is not good management of our resources at this time.
All right. Mic 1.
All right. Good afternoon, Chinese Morrison. Chinese Morrison, General Counsel. My question is of personal nature. A graduate of the Roehampton University, I have this question in terms of will the Ministry of Education entertain acceptance of a PDF form of transcript owing to the pandemic, which is allowing the university not to be able to communicate with the ministry or the UCJ via a sealed envelope transcript?
All right.
Thank you.
Mic 2.
Yannick Dobson, St. Anne, Brownstone, DA. In support of zoning, will it now be mandatory that principals accept and work with the pathway approach in high schools? And how far are the discussions as it relates to making the posts of pathway coaches non-contractual? Thank you.
Mic 1.
Pathway coaches.
Rowena Newman Ridley, Delegate St. Anne. There needs to be greater access to information regarding the Brain Builder Center contracts, and early childhood practitioners also need access to previous year's results of the Age 4 assessment in preparation for the year 2. We find that a number of, for numerous years prior to now,
Question, Ms. Ruman. Question.
My question is that we need access to the assessment, the Age 4 assessment, so that we can make better plans. We have not ever gotten the assessment records of the students going forward. We need access to that.
Thank you. And final question, Minister, so we can just wrap up here. Mic 2, final question.
Good afternoon, Halima Jackson Wilkins, Zone Lead Teacher of Zone 1, Region 1. Since all basic schools cannot be rationalized, and we have the greater portion of school-age children to age 6 or age 5, can there be some consideration for basic schools who have been certified or given permits to operate to also be included in the distribution of devices, laptops, tablets, whatever it is, we want to be considered in that distribution, especially for our trained teachers who are attached to the primary schools.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much. Number of questions here. It looks like my able CEO and PS would be able to answer some of these. The pattern. So PS, in terms of PDF of a transcript, could you answer that? Yeah.
Okay, Minister, the matter of transcript as an authentic document to verify is really a part of the legislative procedure that guides the UCJ. So this is not a decision that our ministry can take. This is a representation that has to be made to the UCJ Council, and they can interrogate. If it is something that allows for the council to make the change, then they will. If not, they can at least advise us as to the best approach to be utilized. I will say, however, that I am aware that there are some issues now in terms of just not the designation, but just to obtain the statement that a program has been accredited, and we are currently looking into this now with the UCJ to see if the information can be provided to the ministry for the EQC and not to allow for you the burden of having to get that information yourself. But as it relates to the approach, whether electronic or through what is actually done now in the sealed envelope and so on, I will have to seek further information and guidance. So you can provide us with your contact details, Roehampton, and we can communicate directly with you in terms of the outcome, since that would be of great concern. Minister, I'll just say quickly that we are well on our way in terms of ensuring that these contractual positions within our schools become permanent positions. Just to advise you that these positions are not automatic. Once the ministry has obtained the post numbers, and this is being reviewed at the Ministry of Finance as we speak, and we have been promised that the process will be completed for the post numbers by the end of August. Following this, we will be able to advance to Cabinet for the approval. Even though you're already being paid, Cabinet still has to approve, and we will send this information out accordingly. So we are, I would say, 95% of the way. But let me just remind our principals especially that it's not just an automatic permanent or a permanence or appointment. There has to be the due diligence guided by your regional director so that we ensure that we have the right persons for the right jobs.
Yes, to speak to the certified basic schools
Yes,
and
CEO.
devices. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you so much. So PS already spoke to the pathway coaches, so we will continue to support our schools that are implementing the pathway program. For our brain builders, I'm not certain of the difficulties that are existing now with respect to the miscommunication, but I know, PS, we have 126 brain builders operating. So what I'm going to commit to is having us convene a meeting with all our operators and myself and our peers, just to listen to what is happening with regards to the misunderstanding on the ground, and to make sure that those can be resolved expeditiously. So that's not at all order for us. We can get onto that. With respect to the access to the assessment for the H4, that is something that we fully support. We will make sure that that is in place going forward. As I indicated earlier, we do not have the assessment data for the last 2 years because of the pandemic. So going forward, we will make sure that that assessment data becomes available. This is why we are moving to get it into electronic form, which will make it easier for us to share and for you to access the data and to use it going forward as you plan for those learners. With respect to the resources for the teachers in the infant, the basic schools, We are not able at this point in time to commit to that because, as you know, those are private entities. And so we cannot commit resources for tablets and laptops for teachers who are not engaged in the government teaching service at this time. What we can commit to is having you have access to our resources. All our learning resources are online. You can download, you can access, and we can provide you with technical support. Our officers can be there with you, getting you ready for your assessment. You are already benefiting from the annual recertification of your permit. What is that called again? Your food handler's permit and so forth. So we have those commitments in place, and you are already benefiting from that. But as it relates to laptops and technological devices, and so we would not be able to commit to that right now because of how you are structured. This is a private business, and so we couldn't commit government resources in that regard at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Chu, CEO. And colleagues, while our president-elect prepare to make her way to the microphone to move the vote of thanks, Honorable Minister, there are just 3 or 4 things I just want to share with you for your research, and we can have dialogue later about it. As it relates to the small schools, grades 1 and 2 in particular, most of which are multi-grade institutions, I'd like for Minister for some consideration the allocation of senior teachers or teachers holding posts of special responsibilities in those institutions, especially where there are brain builders and there's primary and infant school. So there are primary infant with a brain builders program. Consideration for those schools to be granted additional supervisors. That's something for consideration. As it relates to mileage, the refund of mileage travel, Minister, there are some concerns there based on the report I've gotten from the principals in that sector. Special teacher allowance for them, as well as clerical assistance. Yes. We don't necessarily have to answer them now, but something for discussion, even if it is at the monthly meetings. Right, so just to put it there, Minister. All right, thank you very much, Honourable Minister. At this time, we invite our President-elect to move the vote of thanks, and then we bring this session to a close. Could you give it up for the Ministry of Education, the Minister and her team?
Honorable Minister, to our Presidential Corps, Secretary General, and the ministry team, to you, my esteemed colleagues, it is my pleasure to rise in the capacity as President-elect to move this vote of thanks this morning on behalf of this afternoon. Yes, on behalf of this democratic organization who will seek to uphold and preserve the fundamental right of its members to choose, be it election of leaders or life in general. Many thanks to you, my colleagues, who participated in that democratic process for my standing here today. To you, my colleagues from the West, thank you for reminding us of the need for each of us to seek and know our purpose in the JTA, and finding out such, let us continue to carry out our duties to unite as we unite and serve. To our President, Mr. Smith, who brought opening remarks and so ably guided us through this morning's session and afternoon, one of the most anticipated of our annual conference yearly, that our colleagues get this limited opportunity to engage live and direct with our Minister of Education. The online space has certainly improved this somewhat, but it is still limited interaction. I support your position, my Minister, that there is no divide between the Ministry of Education and the JTA in working together to improve the levels of outcomes for our students, as long as the policy directives do not infringe on the natural rights, as well as seek to remove the earned benefits of our members. Your report was comprehensive
but has raised some questions and concerns. As same are rolled out, we will see the details as well as monitor the levels of consultation done with the practitioners on the ground on whom you depend to execute these grand plans. The invitation of our president and IPP to serve on some of these committees is a good indication. Among the many plans shared, several were commendable. For example, the lesson plan repository, a call by the Jamaica Teachers Association for years that will soon become a reality. Increasing the number of master teachers, 3,000 of 25,000 is 0.12%. Still inadequate, but certainly a step in the right direction. Substitute teacher online platform. It can provide work experience for our colleagues freshly minted out of college, as well as share the expertise of our colleagues in overstaffed schools. It is my prayer that the sums to be saved from the rolling out of the My HR program, that said funds will be redeployed to woefully underfunded schools like the infant, primary, and the multi-grade schools of which I serve, and the upgraded high schools. There are several perceived challenges, much needed for dialogue as it relates to the rolling out of sixth form program. But again, I await to see, Minister, your consultation with the administrators and the practitioners at the high school level as you roll out those plans. Minister, please keep in mind the care and preservation of our mental and physical health of the teachers and students as you translate into this institutionalized summer program. At the crux and heart of our challenges we face in education is that of proper resourcing, human, financial, and infrastructural. The many questions my colleagues asked today reiterated this. We need as a nation to commission a study, what it truly takes to finance education. I am so happy that you have committed that you will, having served in the Ministry of Finance, you will be leading that charge and starting that dialogue that, of course, education needs to be better resourced, and as a nation, how it is we will do that. We thank you so much, ably supported by your team, the Permanent Secretary and all the others who are here today, in having this discourse with us. Long live the relationship between the Ministry of Education and the Jamaica Teachers Association as we seek to improve the educational outcomes of the students entrusted in our care. Bless you as we seek to develop the next generation. Thank you so much.
With the permission of the President, I just want to say we acknowledge her vote of thanks, our President-elect vote of thanks, her maiden speech. Colleagues, we would have spent a useful part of the day with the ministry, and we're not charging overtime. We are in this together. But guess what happens? There are some of you who have not checked out, and I'm not sure about extra charge. Please, 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 we are asking to check out during the lunchtime. It's now 1 o'clock. We have to make every effort to come back here at 2 o'clock, or else the longer we take. There are some things we must do today, colleagues, and I'm appealing to you. There might be a different set who are going to be coming in after lunch. We're not so sure, because we have to keep the numbers and the protocols going. Please have a great lunch. Can we put our hands together for a good session right now? We are going to stand. We are going to stand. Yeah, man. We are going to stand, and we are going to ask some persons just so designated to present a token JTA bag. They will have to come down, and please, Minister, we want to see with the JTA bag going to Parliament and whatever. Anyway. And Minister Morgan, we want to see with the JTA bag going to Parliament. Anyway, turn it on. You want it?
Have you received a gift from you, not to return the favor? Just like when I see you walking into the house of the parliament, you will be walking with this bag and the logo on the outside. And you enjoy it.
You can't pronounce the name, man.
You see, he's laughing at me, because I keep calling him Robert Nestor Marley. But I shall remember it's not Marley, but it's Robert Nestor Morgan. Mr. Morgan, the Honorable Minister of State, like you didn't give me a gift. But I believe that the one I got from the minister represents both of you, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. So the Jamaica Teachers Association, at its 57th annual conference, extend to you this gift in our appreciation to you, having sojourned, braved the weather, and have sat down with us for the better part of the day. And we ask that you likewise walk with pride into the House of Parliament and let everybody know that we are collaborating, cooperating, and working for the betterment of the nation's children.
I think it's Dr. Grace. Dr. Troop.
Grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all man's sins. Oh, she reminds me that yesterday she was a storm. But after a storm, there must be a calm. And I'm grateful to you, Madam P.S. You would have helped me when I was a young principal, a young teacher. I don't even think you remember. But you have been there. Don't tell them. Right. And we are looking forward to that kind of collaboration likewise. We know we can depend on you for your support. You have been a tremendous permanent secretary. And we anticipate and we are assured that you will not change because grace transcends eternity. Thank you, Madam Pierce. And we know that you, if for God-forsaken reason, you are called to that place you speak so much about, when you're going, turn the bag this way. But do enjoy the use of it. Now, Minister, please, this is a special one.
Okay.
The indomitable Dr. Casson Troop. Now, colleagues, oh yes, Captain, and maybe I should salute you as a lieutenant myself. Now, colleagues, I will not share with you our history because I don't want it to color the relationship that we'll now have to embark on. But Dr. Troop, thank you very much for sharing with us. And we may not be partners of Region 1 now, but we are partners of Jamaica's education system. So I think we have upgraded the relationship. Enjoy. Mr. Brown, should I tell them we have unfinished business? All right, I will not tell them we have unfinished business. We have started. And the other schools too. All right. That means you're not worthy of to receive this back. Yes, sir. Mr. Brown, we thank you very much, sir. And I know that you're working for the betterment of the schools, especially those that are termite infested and are lacking in fencing and other such much needed amenities. We want to assure you that whenever you go to work with this bag in your car or on your side, remember the needs of the school as it relates to infrastructure. And remember, we may have to talk again. Colleagues, could we give it up for the Ministry of Education personnel, please? And like I've been practicing from a week, by the power vested in me, having been elected by the teachers of Jamaica, I invite you to stand as we sing our grace. Then we will do the honorable thing of adjourning for this session. I'd ask somebody with a more melodious voice.
For health and strength.
For health and strength. Oh Lord, we praise thy name, we praise thy name, we praise thy name, oh Lord. Colleagues, amen. This session of conference is now adjourned and we resume at 2 p.m.